There's probably no better assessment in the proficiency of a cavalry unit than its ability to complete a clean and crisp wheel. To do it right at all gates requires unity and mastery of drill. This week on the 11th OVC, the wheel. The wheel in its most basic form is the foundation for the platoon, its divisions, squadron, and ultimately the regiment. It allows flexibility and maneuverability no matter the size of the column. Using wheels can allow a regiment and column to get in the line of battle within seconds, or allow a regiment to wheel each platoon successively around an obstacle. The wheel separates the wannabe cavalry soldiers from the true horsemen. Well, first off, Poinsetts is based on a double rank system and Cook's is based on a single rank system, meaning that wheeling in a second rank and keeping a line is much more difficult than only having to worry about a single rank. We also chose to start with the School of the Platoon because if we covered the basics and then went into the School of the Squadron, this video would be longer than our canteen video, and trust me, you don't want that. So let's start and dive into the basics. So before we even discuss the second rank issues, let's first go over some basic characteristics of a good wheel. These can be summed up in just a few basic rules that you must have down pat before you plan on doing anything else in the field. So the first rule of executing a clean, crisp wheel is to actually look on the outer flank of the wheel or the outside side of the wheel. Don't keep looking forward. Don't turn too soon. Looking out of the outer flank is one of the easiest things to help correct yourself and help keep in line. Now it's not a full head tilt to the right. That's why they start with eyes right and eyes left. Eyes right, you want your eye down your button line. It's not a hard turn to the right. And of course, eyes left the same way. You want your eye down the button line. You don't want a hard turn to the left or the right. And what that does is allows you to keep alignment looking out toward the flank and still keeping that good, clean, crisp wheel. Rule number 2 is always make sure there's pressure toward the inside. How we say it is look out and lean in. You should always be looking outside of the wheel, but you should always be touching the guide to the inside. If the guide to the inside is pushing you out toward the wheel, then you give to him. If you can't feel the guy on the inside, you want to move in toward him. If this is probably the most important rule when it comes to alignment and making sure the wheel doesn't separate or bunch up together. If there is a gap, you close it. If he gives you pressure, move out. Again, rule number 2 is always give to pressure on the inside guy. And actually, one last thing I would like to add to that rule number 2 is the idea that you're not a true cavalry soldier unless you have bruised legs and get pinched a lot. There should be no excessive pressure. Actually, that is directly from Poinsett, is that there should not be any excessive pressure when you wheel and conduct these maneuvers. So avoid excess pressure. Don't be squeezed. If you're squeezed, someone on either flank is doing something wrong. So rule number 3, the last rule, and if you get this down, you should be able to have the foundations to doing a good, clean, crisp wheel. Rule number 3, what is it? Don't anticipate the order forward. Don't anticipate a 90-degree turn. Don't anticipate a 180-degree turn. Don't anticipate an about face, okay? There is no anticipation. Just do what you're told. Keep that wheel. You could go in circles. In fact, Poinsetts, when it comes to actually drilling the men in the field, Poinsetts just has guys going in circles, just practicing going in circles until they get it. And then once you have that, then you can move on to the other drills. So rule number 3, do not anticipate the order forward, whether it's a 90-degree turn, whether it's a 180-degree turn, or whether it's a complete circle. Do not anticipate the order forward. So now that we know these basic rules and using those rules, let's take a look at one of our drill weekends that we had about a year ago and kind of break down the scenario here using these basic rules of thumb. So here we are, our group kind of doing a drill day, and as we call wheels, in this case this is a left wheel, you'll note that here the entire wheel within just seconds completely dissolves. At first the inside turned too soon, there's a bow in the middle of it, the outside completely fell apart, and the whole wheel was not what it should be. So as we break this down, let's take a look at exactly what happened here. Right here we have, when we start off, we have decent grouping, but as soon as we call the wheel, who's not looking out? Everyone should be looking out, and there's a few people who are not looking out. Some guys are looking in, but most people are looking out at this time, but not everyone is looking out. Then, as we continue on the wheel, it wasn't just a few frames later that when I stop it right here, again, there's a gap opening up on the inside. Ernie, which is the third horse from the right, is turning too soon, and two people at the time are not looking outside, in this case, toward the left-hand side of the frame. Again, right here, this far in, instead of two people not looking out, now there's four people not looking out. So right here you have the bow maturing in the line, and of course that's why you have two NCOs on either side to make sure that everyone else is dressed between those two NCOs. And so here at the end of the wheel, obviously the wheel itself is not even, it doesn't exist. It's all bunched up. The guys in the middle are behind. And one thing that's important to understand is that when you actually do this incorrectly like this, the commander cannot call the next order, because if he wants to call, say, a right wheel right after that, or another left wheel, or say, you know, a charge or something, or say whatever it is, the group is not in line. They are not ready to conduct another maneuver because they are all discombobbled and not where they need to be. So here's another attempt at a wheel. This is the left wheel again. As soon as the wheel is called, again, what do you see? Look at who's looking outside. You can see their heads. And then who's not looking outside. So if you take a look, the beginning starts okay, but as soon as the wheel is called, what you see here is that the inside man, being the pivot man, is actually doing what he should be. He's on a fixed pivot. That's wheels are on a fixed pivot. And then you have the next guy next to him opening up a gap, and of course the third horse in from him has a bigger gap. So on the inside part of the wheel toward the pivot, you actually have two decent sized gaps. Take a look too, as you watch this wheel. Some guys again are looking out, some guys are not looking out. And of course, as the wheel is completed, there's still a gap between the second and third horse. There's not a good dressed line. They're going to have to finish dressing that line as soon as possible. And of course, guys continue to dress it after that. Here's another wheel that right away, you have the fixed pivot. He stays still. Everyone else goes around. That third horse from the inside, again, turns too soon and gets out of line. So again, what do you see here? If you watch this wheel, you know who's looking out. You got three guys right there that I can see looking either toward the horse or down or to the left, not looking at the outside man. The inside part of this wheel completely falls apart as they're not keeping pressure on the inside. Again, when it comes to wheels, we look out and lean in. Look out for alignment and lean in to make sure we're all touching each other. Sorry, one thing that's actually interesting to note between infantry and cavalry is infantry conducts wheels very simply and very easily. It's not a big deal for them. But as the cavalry, it's a little bit more difficult because, number one, you have to understand the concept of a wheel. You have to know how to do a wheel appropriately. But at the same time, you're dealing with another animal who most of the time wants to kick and bite and chew other horses next to him to try to do the same thing and look clean and crisp as the infantry guys do. So there is some hardship with doing wheels mounted, but it should not be that hard with enough drill and enough practice. The cavalry was not immune to drilling. Both the infantry and the cavalry drilled and drilled and drilled. Every part of the military drilled, whether you're artillery, infantry, or whatever, they definitely drilled. And so this is one of the things that you should do is drill with your horses. Here's another wheel right here going around. Again, right there, if you take a look, again, that inside, it was a huge gap between the second and third horse. And of course, right here, you see a big it's not even dressed. Not even dressed at all. They're trying to dress it up. And of course, we got some horse issues with that horse falling behind and getting pinched out. So if you take a look at this wheel again, big gap between the second and third horse. Guys fall out of alignment. No one's looking out like they should be. And when I say forward, there is no alignment, no line when it comes to that. So again, taking a look at this, And we got some gaps between the far left here. So where are the gaps and who is too far back? Arguably the white horse there kind of in the middle of the screen is a little bit too far back, but he is looking out, so I'll give him props for that. In fact, at that screenshot, everyone was looking out, so that's good. If you take a look at here, the pivot man and the guy next to him is way far separated from the rest of the line. Now, if we're doing this right, that third horse from the left with that big gap should be touching the guy with the white horse. Of course, he's not moving in, he's paying attention to who's out there. So again, line-wise right here, they're not bad, but there are significant gaps that they need to move in and close. This is exactly why NCOs need to be on the end, because with their experience, they should be able to understand how big the arc should be for that wheel. And of course, guys, this is a great example of why drilling is so important, especially in cavalry. Cavalry gets a bad rap as being the most farb-tastic reenactors out there. And honestly, we have that reputation for just cause for a lot of reasons, not just our drill, but a lot of times our uniform, our tack, and all that good stuff, and how we fight in the field. But specifically when it comes to our drill, since we are dealing with, very attitude-driven animals, we do need to drill as much as possible. Now, it's hard to drill within the large numbers that we get at main events or mainstream events, but it is important to try to drill at home with your small unit or your small group. Try to do something. Okay, so here we have another wheel, different perspective here on the outside. If you take a look, who's looking in, who's looking out? Who's looking in versus who's looking out. Again, the alignment right here is way off. The guys on the inside of the wheel should be caught up, but they're not. You got a couple guys looking out, which is good. And of course, dressing to the right, which would be where the camera is right now. You guys, one of the things that we always tell our guys is always stay dressed. The order of being dressed should not be said multiple times. You should just always stay dressed. Now on this other wheel, this is a right wheel. You can take a look. As this right wheel started, the alignment was not quite where it should be. And again, not everyone is looking out toward the outside of the wheel. They're paying attention to their horses. They're just looking on the inside, apparently. A couple guys are a little bit too far back, looking down at the horse's head. Again, you got to be a good enough rider that you don't have to maneuver and dink with your horse, that you can actually just ride your horse and pay attention to where you are in the line. Again, when the order forward is called, the alignment of the first line there is not what it needs to be. Guys need to come up and get dressed. Again, you should not be told to dress. You should always be dressed all the time unless otherwise told so. Okay, so here we call a right wheel. And as soon as we call this right wheel, right there, you see the second guy in from the wheel is way too far ahead. He's turning too soon. Actually, two problems. He's too far ahead and he's turning too soon and he's not looking out. He's actually looking at the camera, looking at the inside. So you have a huge gap, a huge issue right there. You have the other guys along the line. The next two guys are actually looking out. The third guy out, not looking out. He's looking in toward his horse. And again, the guy and the kind of the back toward, toward on the white horse, he obviously is not looking out toward the flank guy. He is too far back. Again, at this stop screen, you have the guy in the middle part of the screen, halfway in the line. He's not looking out. And again, the guy second closest to the camera, not looking out as well. He's paying attention to the inside, which is not what you want to do. So now that we've actually showed you some of our drill for our new guys, you can see how drilling is very, very, very important. Drilling when it comes to reenacting, or actually the original guys who were in the field, we need to take pride in our ability to maneuver appropriately how either Poinsett or Cook says. So also with that video, and hopefully you won't laugh at us too much and how bad our drill is sometimes, but that's exactly why we drill. I'm not afraid to say that we suck sometimes and we suck a lot of times, but that's exactly why we drill. And hopefully it's obvious by showing you that video how if you just follow the 3 simple rules of look out, lean in, and don't anticipate, then you will be able to actually perform wheels without even necessarily knowing exactly what Poinsett's manual says. But now that we have a basic understanding of wheels in general, we will continue this discussion and finally go into the manual of Poinsett specifically itself and see what it says about the school of the platoon mounted specifically drill number 511 or 511. So starting in drill 511, Poinsett says that there are two kinds of wheels, the wheel on a fixed pivot and a wheel on a movable pivot. Wheels are always on a fixed pivot and turns are always on movable pivots. So this is also a very common enactorism that you see in the field a lot for reenactments today. A lot of guys make a movable pivot out of wheels. Why? Because it's easier. It's hard to have both sides, both the inside flank and the outside flank, stay fixed and try to have everyone else move in between. It's actually easier to make look better if you actually have the inside move on a movable pivot and they actually give in to the, or I guess give out to the outside. That is actually incorrect. In drill number 511, it actually specifies that wheels are always, and they use the word always, on a fixed pivot and turns are on a movable pivot. Keep that in mind next time you do a wheel, on a fixed pivot. Next, Poinsett says that when troopers conduct wheels or turns, they should execute this movement without separating and without ceasing to observe the alignment of the line, of course. Every time a wheel or turn is executed, the NCO on the outside flank must measure with his eye the arc of the circle he is to pass over so that it may not be necessary for the files either to open or close during the maneuver. He turns his head occasionally towards the pivot and makes sure that he doesn't turn too soon or too wide. Again, guys, when it comes to reenacting units, especially mounted units, please have an experienced NCO on the outside of the flank, because if you have an inexperienced officer, if you have an inexperienced private on the outside of a flank, he will not have the know-how, or he will not know exactly what type and what style of arc to go around. A lot of new guys cut it too short, bunching the group together. That's where you get that squeezing effect. Some guys turn way too wide to compensate for that aspect, and then you have the inside just significantly more gap, I guess if you will, than otherwise. If the NCO perceives that the troopers are too much crowded or too open, he increases or diminishes gradually, again gradually is the key word, the extent of his circle in gaining more ground to the front than to the side. Each trooper of the front rank should describe his circle in the ratio of the distance at which he may be from the pivot. As these different arcs are all passed over in the same time, it is necessary that each trooper should slacken his pace in proportion to the distance from the marching flank. Again, one thing to note is that whatever the order is called at, whether it's a wheel at the trot, a wheel at the gallop, or a wheel at the walk, the pace is set by the outside guy. So a wheel at the walk is the guy on the outside does the walk, which means the rest of the flank, the rest of the line is slower than the walk, which is kind of hard to do, honestly. Doing a wheel at the trot, the guy on the outside flank is at the trot. The guys on the inside part of it, of course, are at the walk. Again, whatever the gait is ordered, it's the guy on the outside that does that, specifically for wheels. Poinsett continues to say that during the wheel, the troopers should turn their heads slightly towards the marching flank. Again, another way of saying this is look out, look toward the outside flank. And they do this to regulate the rapidity of their march and to keep themselves aligned. They should also feel lightly the boot on the side of the pivot. Another way of saying that is you make sure you can touch the guy on the inside. Again, Poinsett says in order to remain close to that side. They should nevertheless yield to pressure coming from the pivot and, of course, resist that coming from the opposite direction. In the wheel, the horses are slightly turned towards the pivot in order to keep them upon the circular line that they have to pass over. When the troopers have bunched too much, they should attempt to correct the fault gradually, not right away, not very quickly. You want to do this gradually. For this purpose, they give alternately a glance to the marching flank and to the pivot, taking care to feel lightly the boot towards the inside guy. You just look back and forth on either flank until you are properly aligned if you come out of alignment. Otherwise, stay in alignment and just look outside. In every kind of wheel, let me say that again, Poinsett specifically says, in every kind of wheel, the troopers should cease wheeling and retake the direction of the march at the command forward, at whatever point in the wheel they may be. So again, don't anticipate the order of forward. Don't think you're going to do 90 degrees. Don't think you're going to do 180 degrees. Don't think you're going to do 45 degrees. Just keep wheeling, keep turning until the commanding officer gives the order forward. So that sums up Poinsett's basic rules and basic guidance on a single rank wheel. Now Poinsett continues to go on to drill number 513. Drill number 513 also specifies that as you guys drill in a single rank system, the group or the line or the platoon needs to get used to doing this at all gates. And what it specifically says is the following. When the troopers have executed several wheels to the right and to the left, and when the horses become calm, the commanding officer causes them to pass to the trot. And after several wheels at the trot, they resume to the walk. Once the troopers are proficient at wheeling in a single rank, the platoon then practices in a normal double rank system that Poinsett is so famous for. So the next thing that Poinsett specifies is how to wheel in a double rank system that Poinsett is known for. Why is this so difficult? Because if you think about it, with the rear rank being a few yards behind the front rank, if both the inside guys are on a fixed pivot, what you're going to end up with is a staggered line that is 2 or 3 guys off of where they started. So Poinsett says the following about that. So once the troopers are proficient at wheeling in a single rank, the platoon then practices in a normal double rank system. When the platoon is formed up, the commanding officer commands, "Platoon, right wheel," or "left wheel, march." At the command march, the troopers of the front rank conduct a normal wheel, and the troopers of the rear rank turn the head and carry the hand towards the marching flank so that each one may be out of the direction of his file leader by 2 troopers. The rear rank needs to make sure to remain about 2 feet from the front rank. The 2 rear rank men at the marching flank or the outside of the wheel who are without file leaders should describe their circle without being further outside of the front rank than is necessary and be able to resume their places behind the file leaders easily when the order of forward is called. So that is specifically what Poinsett says about conducting wheels in the platoon. Again, before we end this episode, the important things to take away from this is that wheels are always on a fixed pivot and turns are on a movable pivot. Number 2, when you wheel in a double rank system, the rear rank actually moves outside of moves out of the flank 2 files over to the right or 2 files over the left, depending on what type of wheel you are doing. When forward is called, you move right back in line. It's very similar to left and right oblique, to where as soon as forward is called, you're right directly in line. So keep that in mind. As a rear rank, you need to move outside 2 file mates, and then when forward is called, then move back inside the same 2 file mates to then get right behind your normal file mate. So we hope you enjoyed this basic introduction of Poinsett's maneuvers of wheels on a fixed pivot. We hope to see you in the field. Please, if you enjoy this, like us on Facebook. Please ring the bell on the bottom right side of the corner here. Like us on Facebook, get in the field, drill, and ride hard.